Um, Hi, everybody. Welcome to this very special panel that is meant to celebrate the launching of our issue on the houses of Aalto. Let me introduce the panelists we have with us today very, very quickly. First, we have Sirkka-Liisa and Jari Jessonen, who are joining us from Helsinki. They are the two wonderful people who are responsible for both the text and the images, especially the photography that are included in this issue of Alvar Aalto's houses for A+U. And we also have joining us from New Haven, Connecticut, Professor Eva-Liisa Pelkonen, who is a historian and also an she also teaches architecture, who has written extensively on Alvar Aalto, on Eero Saarinen, but also on the slightly different topics. She has also been publishing quite extensively on the relationship between architectural production and media and images. Her book, Achtung Architecture, and also more recently, a book called Exhibit A on architectural exhibitions. So we'll be hearing first from the Jessonens, from Jari and Sirkka-Liisa Jessonens on how they approach this issue of A+U on Alvar Aalto's houses, on selection of images, and to take us on the tour of the houses that are showcased in this issue. And then this will be followed by a presentation by Professor Pelkonen, who will be introducing in her presentation more of a contextual take on Alvar Aalto's architecture, situating it in the broader context of a society and architectural community of modernism, both within Finland in the early 20th century and internationally. There will be opportunities for questions from the audience. If you follow the link at the bottom of your screen here, the questions will be collated and I'll be able to follow them as they come on. And at the last third of our session this evening, we'll have a discussion. I have a few questions prepared, and in the meantime, I'll be monitoring the chat room and presenting them to the panelists as appropriate. I guess I should also briefly introduce myself. I am Sang Kwan. I'm an editorial advisor to A+U. I teach architecture and architectural history at the University of Tokyo and also at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And it is a great pleasure and honor for me to help moderate the session this evening. So without further ado, perhaps I could ask Sirkka-Liisa and Jari to start their presentation first.
Thank you, Sang Kwan, for your presentation. Right. Okay, can you confirm that everything is technically okay?
Hello, can you hear us?
No, not really.
Okay.
Now it's better.
Can you see the image?
We can see the images. The audio, the sound is not particularly clear.
Okay.
I should open the window.
Now it's much better. Now it's fine.
Okay, we will speak nearer to the computer.
I see.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Sang Kwan, for your good introduction, and we would like to thank our publisher, A+U, that was organized this event in order to spread the knowledge on Aalto. It has been a very great pleasure for us to collaborate with with the A+U. And of course, during these times of COVID-19, this is a great idea to travel to the environments designed by Aaltos when travel is not otherwise possible. In my part of the talk, I will have examples on the close-ups, meaning mostly images on details and materials. And Jari will comment the taking on the images and so how he has seen the buildings and landscape and with his eyes. And then in the end, Jari will also have a few words about the Aalto workshops and connecting with the present exhibition in Tokyo. But to start with this title image, it's actually the atmosphere of Aalto buildings and the comprehensiveness of his architecture, which are a factor of result of many different factors. We have this spatial vibrancy. I'm especially interested in the sequences in Aalto buildings. It's the interaction between the building and its landscape or nature around it, and then the balance between details and materials. And I have in many connections also read Aalto's own texts. Sometimes they are in a way ambiguous or a bit vague, but they have a clear relationship with the buildings also. So they are kind of a important background information, at least for my work or my writing. I write about Aalto. So there will be some quotations. For Aalto, there was always he was sure that there had to be an opportunity for change and growth, and he did not believe in mechanical architecture. So formalism meant humanity for him. So this humanizing of mechanical was the essence of his buildings. Okay, Jari will have a comment here.
Yeah,
we're not hearing you, Jari. We could hear Lisa very well, but we can't hear you now.
I took this picture in 1996 when the composer Joonas Kokkonen was still alive. It was the one Sunday morning when I visited his house. He was sitting there in his studio, which pictures you can see in the book, and reading the Sunday newspaper, Helsingin Sanomat, and start to tell the stories that Aalto and for him they were very good friends. They were together in the Finnish Academy, and Aalto was very close friend. And Kokkonen was once asked to Aalto that is there any architect in your office who can design the house for me? Aalto says, no, there is no any architect in my office. I can design in that your house. So then Aalto was the architect of the building, and many other stories. And I asked the Kokkonen that did anybody was taping your stories, and no, nobody is not interested in those. I said, oh, I'm very sorry that I didn't have the recording. Anything that I could. I try to remember that your stories now, but I have to take those pictures. That's why I'm here. Okay.
So now we move forward. And
Shirley-Lisa, I think you have to speak up again. Or
Okay, yes.
So,
So
now it's
when
good.
writing the essay, can you now hear? Can you hear now?
Now, yes.
Okay, good. So this is very small, the space we have to. So importance of time is one of the titles in the essay in the A+U issue, and at least in Finland, I think in Japan also, this understanding for patina, the manifestation of dignity in matter, is something that we share, and also patina in Aalto buildings or passing of time is very clearly evident, and it has to do, of course, with the aging of materials, and somehow this aging of materials, it in a way clarifies, or it makes the time and its passing, its duration, sometimes its slowness, and also I would say kind of appreciation of time understandable. And that has been very typical or natural also for Aalto since his early career. And Aalto was he was also critical upon the so-called modern materials, synthetic materials, and in one of his articles or writings, he has mentioned that materials need a long period or period of development before they begin to have an impact on human culture. So for Aalto, this connection materials and culture was very important. And here few examples of the door handles in his buildings. That's of course also the first moment when the visitor in a way meets the building or touches the building. In case of Aalto's thinking, the first encounter actually happens a bit before the door handle, but the touching is the first moment important. And then another aspect, if we think of time, is also the experience of the building, how people move in the building, what is the rhythm of the movement. And I already mentioned the word sequences, which are I would say in all other buildings, whether they would be small or private homes or larger complexes, university buildings, etc. This kind of leading the visitor or leading the user of the building throughout the spaces is important, and it's evident in very early buildings as well, as we have here the two images of the Terho Manner's house from the early 1920s. So somehow the connection from the pavilion to the main building, as you can see in the left-hand side image, or the staircase leading to the upstairs private rooms or bedrooms. That's also, it's a bit meandering. It's kind of, there is something lurking behind the corner. And the same ideas in a bit different form can be also seen, for example, in Villa Mairia's famous staircase in the living room. Here we have actually a spread from the A+U issue showing the details of that staircase, which are also telling about this transition and the sensitiveness, how Aalto uses materials and in a way marks the now the visitor or user should halt, should stop here, should look the flower stand, look the first step of the staircase. So the details very often come to the attention of the person moving through the spaces. And this moment of stopping there is very often there is a very important aesthetic and sensitive experience. So details are extremely important in many ways. And somehow this kind of views also tell about the same story. These are also examples I would connect with growth. And if we think that Aalto saw architecture as a complex development process, he emphasized I would say, always emphasized that the change and growth that resembled natural organic life, that was the only real style for him. And of course, he was especially respecting wood. And in addition to structural functions, all of these kind of load-bearing elements, they also have the psychological and biological function that wanted to emphasize. So pillar is not only pillar for its structural use, it has also another kind of a task. So necessity becomes a virtue. And actually the pillars in all types of buildings, they are important for part of buildings. There is also kind of endless group. There's a lot of variations. There are different combinations, as you can hear. Yes, Aalto mentioned that there is a very famous essay, Drought and the Stream, from the year 1949. He says or writes, architecture and its details are in some way all part of biology. Then he continues, and we need time for everything that develops and crystallizes in our world of ideas. I think Jari had also some comments on these images. You mentioned about this connection with the views and nature in way of taking photographs.
Yes.
You have to aim at the speaker again, Jari.
Yeah. So with those pillars, I would like to show also the people that how the nature it's connecting even inside to the home. That quite often Aalto was making those pillars that they are close to the window, that you can see the garden and the nature. It's connecting with nature.
Okay, continue. So this
It's your turn, Lisa, to aim at the speaker, at the mic.
Okay, yes, better now?
Yes,
Okay.
now it's good.
Yes. I was just saying that this refining and variation is a continuous theme, and it recurs in different scales. In some cases, we can see it in a building scale. Even closer in small details, they are also, and somehow the classical example is Aalto has compared the affinity between chair leg and a bearing column with each other. So this kind of parallels or analogs are important, and they can be seen also in maneuvers that demarcate the space, or in the grills lamp shape. So in a way, different parts of the building or are fixed to one another in a somehow simultaneously abstract and concrete way. So this makes, I would say, Aalto's buildings extremely interesting, and there is this endless multi-layeredness in them. And of course, there are, we think, these private homes, private houses. We have houses from, or buildings from different decades. We have buildings that are larger, some are smaller. Villa Maria is, I would say, without any doubt, the most richest in its variations, in the combinations of details and materials. And the so-called forest of vertical trees is one theme that leads throughout the building. And the building parts repeat features of the surrounding forest landscape. And in the Villa Maria, these biological design principles are extremely apparent, or they are there. They form the building. And in 1938, Aalto wrote about combinations. Combinations never become schematic. It also results in unlimited riches and perpetual variation in organically growing forms. And this growth theme is clearly present in Villa Maria. About at the same time, Aalto was very critical on standardization, and he emphasized how in nature standardization is aimed mainly and almost solely on the smallest possible units, cells, and these he realizes in his.
So I would like to say that the middle picture from Villa Maria, it has taken just after the rain. As you see, the colors are very bright, and then the gate it's open, so it's get the feeling that they are waiting you or somebody to coming in to their garden, or then somebody has just went but forget to close to the gate.
Then a third theme might be on listening.
Sir Kalisa, we really can't hear you.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Now you're here.
No, Yari was actually projecting quite well just now.
Okay, now I tried better.
Okay, now it's good. Thank you.
But thank you very much. Sorry about these technical problems. So the third theme would be on listening, and it has to do with senses. And actually, of course, the essential quality, if we think matter, is that they can, or they are perceived by the senses. So it's about touching, it's about hearing, it's about seeing, of course, sometimes also smelling. And I would say that Aalto has a very strong emphasis, might be even subconscious in some cases, but his buildings are tactile. And since the time of the Roman architectural writer Vitruvius, the principle that the matter must be used in accordance with its internal nature and in its right place has been essential. And the ideal of durability is one aspect of that. Yeah, and also the sensibility and also rational way to choose the best possible building materials for each location, as it has been important for in terms of vernacular, in the case of vernacular buildings, for example. If we think listening, one aspect that I have been thinking about is how Aalto has been listening the cultural signs when designing Maison Louis Carré in France. And if I would compare Villa Mairea and the Maison Carré, we have here a building which is very elegant. It's somehow, if we think the choice of materials is a bit more limited than Villa Mairea, but on the other hand, then it's very non-polished, it's light-hearted. There is a combination of white rendered exterior surface complemented by local natural stone and very fine copper details, which are kind of internalizing the locality. In terms of also how those details were turned into the interior elements of the interior. And the word or the concept of intrinsic ornamentation, I think, is a good to be mentioned in the case of Maison Carré. Here, one detail still on Carré's eaves. So this respect for material is also here important. And Aalto himself has linked material and form, saying forms must smoothly yield to the structure of the material, and even with its delicate nuances of color. Of course, Aalto used materials like wood and brick that had their natural color as the main role. And then we have a theme on humanity, and of course, human aspects, humanity is linked with Aalto's architecture in general. And if we think material, so for Aalto, that word meant matter in the material sense. Like I said, it could be brick or wood or concrete, of course, as a starting point for structures. But it meant more for him. It meant kind of a refining a pure moral activity into a spiritual process. And Aalto stated himself that the social purpose of the building plays a role in the choice of materials. If we think the experimental house, which is his own summer home, maybe the social purpose is not so a valid definition, but essential is how the material serves people emotionally. And the social purpose in this case might be the family and friends gathering together around the fire in the courtyard of the experimental house. So it is in 1950, Aalto stated, for architecture to take a deeper role as a humanizing cultural factor, we need works cast in matter itself. No words can help. So at this point, he turned away from the words and concentrated on buildings. As we have been looking very closely on details, I have here a few images looking at buildings a bit further away, not so much further, but a bit further. First of all, here are two images from the Aalto house, which is of course a personal building. It's the family home. It's a building where the first studio or office was located or integrated with. And
I have to ask you, Sirkka-Liisa, I have to ask you to speak into the microphone again, please.
Yeah, so sorry. So these two images in a way convey again the experience and the importance of the materials, often placed or detailing, often placed against a very simple background. The texture of the walls plays an important role in the overall unity. Whether it would be a brick wall, as we have here in the interior, or just the brick as it is, or a softer acoustical material. And these two images, one of Villa Scheppet and one of Villa Kokkonen, one of the latest Aalto houses, the same themes as we have gone in a way through this on materials, on humanity, on listening, and on growth are also visible. Those are visible, for example, in how the different material touches or the use of materials is evident, and how they also in a way reveal how wood is an essential element, or how there are accents. For example, in the edge of the fireplace of the Villa Scheppet, you can see a brass detail. So this kind of a small accents are also important. And then two images of the exteriors of two buildings, the Aalto house and Villa Mairea. And these also reveal how the aforementioned aspects are brought together in multi-layered way. And I would say also, especially in connection with these two buildings, is that these are examples how modernism meets vernacular and how buildings meet nature. And this multi-layeredness, which I consider to be an important, I would say almost in the core of Aalto architecture. It's created in a conversation between the space, materials, and details, and of course surroundings as well. And at its best, I would see that you can see and experience a forest instead of a tree. Jari will continue now.
I think. Okay. We have been teaching over 15 years for the Aalto University, and Tennessee University has a summer school in Finland, and during those years that the student has been also measuring some Aalto building, making making the drawings, and then after that they have been making the models of those. So in that process they have been study for the some Aalto houses very carefully, and here it's in 2017 we went to the Maison Carré and study for that building, and then came it to Helsinki and work it in the Aalto University. And 2019 we were in Muuratsalo experiment house, and we stayed it in the Säynätsalo town hall, and because that's quite close to the Muuratsalo. And here is some pictures for that. Then last year was planned to have the workshop in Japan, and anyways that was do it, but in online, and I was in Finland, and we had some Zoom lectures, and then the student was made it the models which are now exhibited in the Setagaya Art Museum. Daisy Sakaguchi from Nagoya Institute of Technology was the teacher and the coordinator person in Japan, and also the Aalto Museum was helping a lot. Most of the drawings was coming there, and this is the Paris pavilion model, and also student was study for the Aalto's standard houses, and making nice models that you can see now in the exhibition there in the Tokyo. And here is the last picture, which is from MIT building in Boston.
This is. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Sirkka-Liisa and Jari.
And I would like to thank also Aino and Alvar Aalto and also Elisa Aalto. Unfortunately, her signature is not here because they are the persons who have created all this that we are talking about. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm also glad that we had the audio situation resolved so that we can hear more from you during the discussion session. So without further ado, Professor Paukkunen, are you ready for your presentation? Okay. Sirkka-Liisa, can I ask you to turn off your share screen, please?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. We still see your screen. Good. Now.
Okay. Now it's
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and I think this is your
Okay.
second slide, no? Or this is your first? We have a map.
Okay, here.
Good.
So first, thank you for this wonderful lecture and wonderful publication that Jetsonen's put together. And I thought that my talk hopefully will complement their very close material and spatial reading of the Aalto buildings by situating them, or some of them, in the historical and geopolitical context of their native Finland, and also in the kind of social and in the social and aesthetic ideas and ideals that they presented at the time. I've always thought of both Aaltos as not only wonderful architects and artists, but also people who actively engaged the intellectual culture of their time. And I think they saw houses in particular as tools, kind of almost like social equipment, important social and political equipment at the time. And this is all very, broad periodization, but I would suggest that the work that in housing that also Jetsonen's present in the book can be kind of divided in three main periods. Historical periods and periods where that gave birth to different type of forms and different type of buildings. So the first period is in the 20s. Finland had just become independent. They were residing in Jyväskylä, which is located in the center of the country. And they were very interested in ideas about, kind of cultural development, idea about national identity. And this is the period they were very fascinated, kind of somewhat paradoxically, considering that they were interested in national identity. They were very interested in Italian vernacular architecture and classical architecture. The second period, kind of again, in very broad terms, in the late 20s and in the 30s, they become they start traveling to the continent, and this is a period that they moved to Turku, and the country was actually experiencing a period of rapid industrialization and economic growth. People started to move. It's actually paradoxical because the rest of the world was suffering from economic recession, but Finnish economy was doing quite well. The forest industry was booming. And in the 40s, of course, and late 30s, 40s, Finland was going through a very hard period, Second World War, and the period of reconstruction that followed. And the Aaltos were very involved with that. This is the time that Aalto kind of truly discovers also the domestic vernacular architecture. And then I touch kind of in the end shortly the kind of post-war atonement moment. So Aalto actually wrote quite a lot, as Sirkka-Liisa already suggested. He wrote a lot about kind of Finnish, the cultural situation, the political situation, and he wrote a lot about houses and housing. This is one of the earliest articles where he talks about, the title is already very telling. He said, one's own house, why does it have to be beautiful? And he writes, the beauty of the home has to do with responsibility. From the exterior of the home should not only bring pleasure to ourselves, but also provide an example and support for others. And every one of them should help to give a positive impression of Finland and strengthen our own belief in Finnish culture. This idea that houses are kind of the root for cultural development and improvement of Finnish culture is something that they actually got mainly from German literature at the time. I mean, I know Aalto played an important role in this regard, but the house was really at the center of Finnish cultural identity and improvement. And what is also interesting, and the Jetsonens have in their book several of these buildings from the 20s where they employ classical motifs. And it's quite an endearing aspect, I think, of the houses of this period, when they always recognize that Finland is kind of far removed from the origins of, so to speak, of and the heart of Western European culture. But that this, like this quotation from yet another article from the early 20s suggests that they kind of crystallize the remoteness of the country, but they are not. But it kind of demonstrates the striving that the country is going through at this time to elevate Finnish culture to the level of the rest of Europe. So these are, of course, some of the houses. The Villa Flora is in wonderful pictures of Villa Flora included in the Jetsonen's book, and these two others on the right, Casa Laurea, that was built, and the house that Aalto designed but did not build for his brother Rainer on the right, demonstrate this interest in importing these classical motifs. Of course, the right building on the right is really a ode to Pompeian courtyard house. So Aalto considered this importation of the motifs really at the heart of the Finnish kind of culture and architecture. It is actually quite, Aalto is also fascinating to me because he evolved in time quite drastically, often depending on the time and the people that he met. He absorbed ideas, he engaged ideas that he encountered. In the late 20s, he starts traveling to continental Europe, to Holland, to France, to Germany, and encounters ideas about modern architecture, rationalization, functionalism, and they, of course, get very early then employed in housing. He becomes, of course, interested in mass housing, and this is one of the first examples of a kind of modern mass-produced housing that the Aaltos produce shortly after they moved to Turku. Aalto becomes also involved in the SIAM and attends the meeting in Frankfurt called on the minimum dwelling. And a year later, in 1930, they participate in an exhibition on minimum dwelling and design this these rooms that also include furniture that they designed, where they explore ideas about how to work, how to cook. The couch that you see in the front can be modified into a bed and so forth. So these are very different ideas that were put in place in the early part of the 20s. The Ghana, the classical details, and now we have this sort of celebration of the modern urbanite dwelling. They also become very interested in what was going on in Russia at the time, and this idea that houses are part of a larger kind of a state plan, larger geographical strategy. As you see on the left, this is an article that he wrote in 1932 on the housing system in the Russia, where he shows one of these industrial towns. This is designed by Ernst May, which entails, again, housing is thought of as part of a larger economic proposition. Aalto was, like I said earlier, he was really engaged with basically all the key figures of the modern movement. He was bilingual and spoke many other languages. He spoke German and was bilingual in Finnish, Swedish. So he had a lot of friends in Sweden, and published, among others, this article in a publication called Architecture and Society on the geography of a housing question. Again, and these ideas were very crucial for him when he started working on with the Finnish forest industry. This idea that, again, housing must be thought of a key component in a kind of larger state planning. He talks about how different infrastructure like telephone can kind of get telephone lines and electric lines and rivers and roads can help organize housing in a manner that is fits the kind of economic and spatial planning of the country. He talks about decentralization and clusters. And it's interesting because at this time in the late 30s, he starts to work with many of the main Finnish paper companies, which of course by nature are located in various remote locations around the country where the material is being sourced. And he gets very interested in this type of cluster type housing. In Sunila, it's kind of a fan-shaped kind of a typology, and in Kautua, in the western part of Finland, it's this sort of stacked type housing. So ideas about clustering come into play. And then finally, of course, all that economic prosperity comes to halt with the advent of the First Finno-Russian War in 1939. The eastern part of Finland, Karelia, is occupied and greatly destroyed by the advancing forces. Here are some pictures on the left of the destroyed dwellings in Karelia, and that Aalto actually used while lecturing in various countries, kind of gaining support for the reconstruction efforts, and gets very interested in, for the first time really, in Finnish vernacular architecture, particularly the architecture of the lost Karelia. Here you see on the right a picture by a famous photographer, Inha, from the late 19th century, which shows this sort of very organic, loose organization of the Karelian house typology. During the war, he spends extended periods of time teaching in the US at MIT, where he studies this type of typology influenced by the Karelian house, a house that he called embryo house, the idea that you can kind of establish a very core dwelling that then gets expanded and varied, and a model that can be adapted to different type of site conditions. This idea of variability, growth, organic growth, ideas that he starts developing for different companies and prefabricated housing as well for some of these wood workers housing project that he starts doing at this time, and also housing that for returning veterans. So after the war, he loses his wife, and I think has been acknowledged, this house in Muuratsalo is very much an kind of an atonement, and built in that very sad period of his life. And I think it's quite moving how two ideas kind of come together in this house. On one hand, the main dwelling unit is again an ode to the Pompeian house, even with its red walls, and the tail kind of has that wonderful organicity of the Karelian vernacular. So it is a kind of the two worlds coming together in a very moving manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I do have a few questions. I think the two lectures really complement each other extremely well, that we're able to see, on the one hand, the close-ups by the Jessamins, and then more of a macro perspective from Ava's presentation. So thank you. I thank all three of you very much for your work. I have a few questions, and maybe the easiest way to get things started is to talk about Alvar Aalto as a person. I have heard stories when he was teaching at MIT in the 1940s, that he was really, and we see this in photographs that are both included in this volume and also at the exhibition that is currently on view at the Setagaya Art Museum, that Aalto was really a bon vivant. He loved living life. He enjoying life. There was a very famous German restaurant in Boston that he would go to all the time, and he would order schnapps, and he would take his students, and it was always a very, very fun event wherever Aalto was holding court. And you know, talking about, maybe I can get all of you to pitch in and talk a little bit, give a bit more kind of three-dimensionality to Aalto as a person. And I think projecting from it the different aspects of how we can further read these houses, these buildings that he designed. His role, particularly in the production of these houses. I mean, in his houses, we have this wonderful simultaneity between artisanship on the one hand and industrialization on the other hand, something that Jari spoke to, and also Ava's presentation also spoke to. To what extent, I mean, his houses, I would imagine, take a lot of site supervision, and to what extent was he involved in the actual construction of these houses? I mean, the care with which it's quite evident that went into the construction, the making of these houses, I think are very, very evident in the photographs we saw this evening. I also want to talk a little bit more about the personal background of Aalto, particularly the upper bourgeois class that he came from, and the community of associates, friends, and clients that he had. Villa Maria is is an incredibly large and lavish house. You know, we speak of Mises' Tugendhat house in Brno as built for a grand bourgeois industrialist, but this is actually quite a bit more substantial even than the Tugendhat house. And Maison Carrée is certainly another example of these extremely affluent clients. So can you speak a little bit about the community of that Aalto operated in, which also extends, in fact, to the more industrial aspects of his work? I mean, he was on personally friendly terms with a lot of these owners and managers of these factories, and this is how he got involved in these construction, in these projects. And he was associated with these large industrialists at a high level, and had these opportunities to get involved in them. So how did these happen? Can we hear a bit more from you on these aspects of Aalto as a person?
Well, so I mean, I did not meet Aalto. I don't know if the Jetseners met Aalto, but I mean, part of it is, of course, has to do with the Finnish context. Finland was at that time, when he emerged in the 20s, very divided country. It was divided on linguistic grounds. It was a bilingual country. It was divided politically. There were people that were, the left and the right were very divided. People who we had a civil war. And third, it was divided between the urban and the rural Finland. So we have kind of three divides. And Aalto kind of navigated those. I mean, he was an urbanite, he was bilingual, he was politically quite ambiguous. I mean, like some of the articles, like the one about Russian housing and the Swedish article about geography of a housing question, they were very left-wing magazine. But he also wrote those articles for kind of a more bourgeois type of magazines that were, geared to the urbanites. So he, and he, was mostly urban and lived in urban, but then also later on it particularly embraced the countryside. So I think my view of him and the way that I understand him was that he was somebody who was able to navigate this type of divide. He was, maybe you can call it as a synthesizer of ideas. But of course, it is a talent, a very useful talent for architects to be able to cater to different type of audiences, engage different type of people from the industrialist to the worker. So I think he had this ability of a certain kind of nimbleness, if you wish, social nimbleness and smarts that allowed him to navigate these very, very tough divides at that time and get along with, I always say that he would get along with the communist and the capitalist, He was friends with the Rockefellers and, he had that ability, I believe.
Sirpilius and Jari, can I ask you?
Yes, I would like to say that I have said it that Muuratsano experiment house, it's Aalto's honeymoon house, Aalto's and Elisa's. Aalto's first wife, Aino, died in 49, and then Aalto done it quite many competitions. He was very sad, and he made it very many competitions which he won, like Otaniemi, the new university, technical university to Espoo, and then the Säynätsalo town hall was also in that time. And in Säynätsalo town hall project was working young architect Elsa Mäkiniemi, which was coming to Aalto's wife. And during that they were designing to Säynätsalo town hall, Aalto got it a lot to his summer house. And that was, I think so, Elisa's and Aalto's more honeymoon house. That they were very excited, that place, and I have seen it, the old pictures where the house was just built. Aalto was looking very happy with Elisa. So I have that kind of feeling that it's not not the sad moment that Aino has passed away. And the one other thing that there was just, I don't know, have you seen it? There was the Virpi Suutari's new document film from Aalto, which the film director has studied the Aalto's personally, and Aino Aalto's and Aalto's personally letters. And for example, those letters that Aino Aalto was sending to Aalto to MIT, and quite often of those letters, Aino Aalto was writing on the end that no too many drinks. So so she was controlling Finland that Aalto is not drinking too much there.
Yes, I think Eva-Liisa, you summarized extremely well the Aalto's personality and how he was capable of navigating. And I would say that this is my imagination. We have not either met him, but of course we have met quite many people who have worked in his office and in some cases interviewed them. And this, he was socially very clever. He was good to communicating with, I would say, with workers, with anyone, bankers, whoever. And then you asked about this, commissioners and clients. And if we think the houses, the clients in quite many cases were personal friends or somehow related from the early times on, or then involved with the industrial commissions. So these kind of two main groups can be recognized or differentiated from the houses. But nevertheless, I would say he was extremely good in communicating all levels. Also, an example is how he was writing, or how active he was in writing articles since, well, from the early career on until 1950s. So that's one. It's I would say it's an exception among Finnish architects of that time. And then a comment about, of course, Villa Maire and its lavishness or whatever. The family was the richest in Finland.
Oh.
So that explains, yeah. So there was a lot of wealthiness behind the commission. Yeah. And actually the whole company, in a way. Not only the couple, but the whole company. Oh yes, and Jari is here saying that in the case of Maison Carré, also there it's a good example how Aalto became friends with Louis Carré, personal friends. They get along very well when they had a couple of wines in Venice, glasses of wine. But it's also Louis Carré. He had funds. But he had the will and he had the vision, so it's so there were the kind of a good starting points.
Yeah, that you're in the project descriptions for the Maison Carré that you wrote. You described this lunch they had at the Hotel Danieli in Venice, and where this this rapport was built. So I thought that was a very memorable moment. Yeah.
And maybe it's good to mention that Louis Carré, when his Paris apartment was in a building designed by Le Corbusier, and he would have had an option to have a Corbusier as his architect, but he didn't want.
Mm-hmm. I have another question from the audience, and this has to do with the fan motif in his plans. where did it come from? Is there some inspiration from nature or from landscape or from his from art? This planning, how did it come about? I guess it's also present in some of the furniture designs.
Okay, that's I have never checked what would be the first fan. There are some fans in the fan shape in plans in the church competitions in the 1930s. So there, I think it connects with the, in a way, with the visibility and with the acoustical. In a way, the plan is, well, it's, you know, functional starting point. I think it has to do with many things, because it might be it could be a form with sits with a certain kind of site condition, for example. I don't know. I have not studied that, but I think Eva-Liisa has something to comment on this.
Yeah, I think what for me is one of the, I mean, the amazing thing about Aalto is that he was such a synthesizer. I mean, he had a truly kind of synthetic mind. And, you know, I think you're absolutely right. You know, sometimes it had to do with programs. Sometimes it had to do with the kind of existing typology, like, you know, the motifs from classical architecture. But it's also at this time in the 30s when he starts to do the experiments with wood lamination. So it also is a kind of a material technique and motive that then gets kind of folded back into, in a different scale, into buildings. So I think it's a product of many sources. And I think the material, I mean, you talk so wonderfully about the materiality, kind of material imagination, Aalto's material imagination, particularly in that sort of starting in the 30s. And it is when it, you know, it emerges at the same time with the material. You know, he uses, of course, the fan also for the table, you know, and you know, the leg, the bent wood, so the fan appears also there. So multiple sources, perhaps in multiple scales.
Yeah.
We have another question, has to do with the life events in Aalto's over Aalto's life, the major events, and how does it correspond or relate to the kind of shifts in architectural style or method that he might have followed. I think your second slide with the 3 locations, I think to some extent illustrates these major changes. Of course, these also have to do with broader currents in technology, broader currents in ideology, in aesthetics that were, of course, both coming in domestically, but also internationally. Can I ask you to speak a little bit more about that? How about the specific shifts between the various phases of his career?
Well, it is quite. I often, you know, I talk about this in my book, but Aalto's life, the whole lifespan, kind of corresponds very beautifully, aligns with some key moments in Finnish history, and you know, he was born, you know, at the turn of the century, kind of at the advent of the national romantic movement. He graduates into independent Finland. He actually served in the Civil War also. Of course, everybody's lives were touched by very dramatically by the Second World War. And then he dies kind of at the you know, beginning of an end of the Cold War, you know. Actually, his last building, the Finlandia House, the last building that was completed during his lifetime, the Finlandia House was designed and built to house the famous summit of 1976, where Brezhnev met Gerald Ford with the goal of putting end to the Cold War. As we know, we took a few more, it took 15 more years to be accomplished, but nevertheless, his life kind of coincides with some major events, and of course, the nature of the events was such that they were, everybody's lives were touched, and Aalto's career was really, of course, shaped by, historical and economic currents. He was, like I hopefully demonstrated in my talk, really engaged with these historical, social, economic ideas and context. So yes, and it's in a way it's a talent. I mean, we, of course, whether it was Mies van der Rohe, the Germans, basically I think 20th century architecture, the ones that we still study, somehow we're all faced with navigating very tough issues, and so Aalto was no exception, maybe most extremely so. And he actually contemplated emigrating to the US. But that's also interesting to think, what if he had taken that route, what would Aalto have become? Because of course, most of his buildings in Finland were built in the 50s. I mean, that's when he had the most productive period. So sometimes it's also interesting to think in, what if he had taken a different route, that's a very good question actually to contemplate.
Thank you.
And maybe to
yeah, please.
Maybe to add or somehow more ifs, or actually I was thinking that the time that Aalto spent in MIT and designed or started to design the MIT Baker House dormitory, and which is considered to be the first red brick period building. So if Aalto hadn't been in the MIT or Boston area, where you can see brick buildings in the townscape a lot, would he had moved into that red? This is also a kind of a question that can be asked. Yeah. So in that sense, somehow also the moments of life that you are somewhere for a bit longer time, not just visiting, so it can be an inspiring time. Or how strongly actually the 1924 honeymoon was affecting the late 1920s still classical buildings. That's also interesting question.
Yeah, and all the travels, like we already learned that one dinner in Venice might lead to a commission. I think the fact that Aalto traveled so extensively, sometimes when you look at his itinerary, you wonder, when did he do the work? Because of course it took a long time to travel those days. A lot of it was done by train. Of course, the US trips were done by boat at that time. So it took a long time to do these trips, but of course they were totally instrumental in shaping his architecture, his thinking, and even yielded these commissions, many commissions. So traveling was really a key part of who he was and who he became.
Actually, he started to use aeroplane very early, since the 1920s, and he was very excited about it. But if there is a question, who did the work? Of course, the office, especially after the Second World War years, it was not large, but there were capable and long-time architects working in the office, reliable. when we have been publishing a book on Aalto's churches, and at that time I was reading much of the correspondence also, but where also the clients were asking, when does Alvarado come to the construction site? And then there was also quite often the secretary writing, well, he can't arrive now because he is traveling in Italy, or he is traveling in France or in Switzerland, but maybe after a month or 2 months he might be able to come. But then meanwhile the employees, the staff was taking care.
Yeah, and I mean, just one more note about the traveling. He went to a classical lycée, which valued cultivating language skills and knowledge about European culture. So he spoke many languages. It cannot be undermined how important it was in giving him access to conversations. I actually learned, apart from Finnish, Swedish, German, French, English, the Dimitri Porphyrio told me that he also spoke some Greek, which is just mind-baffling, that they would often exchange sentences in Greek. So he was a truly polyglot, and also that shaped very much who he was. And if you look at the correspondence that he had with so many figures, key figures, it was always written in the language, in multiple languages. So it is another very important aspect of who Aalto was. He was a polyglot.
Yes, Aalto's longtime friend, the Professor Nils-Erik Wickberg, has told that in 1950s, Aalto was once asked that there is now I have got so many commissions, the designing the buildings out of Finland. Should I take all of those? Should I take the more work from out of Finland? So Wickberg has said it to Aalto that please design the buildings in Finland, because that's much more easy to people come to look those that they are in one country.
All right, so we do have a few more questions from the audience, and I'll combine maybe two of them, since we spoke of the relationship between Aalto as this kind of choreographer and synthesizer of many things, many people, many different ideas, different languages, different cultures, how he ran his office, and maybe talk specifically at the design of furniture and household products, industrial design, and the relationship between the manufacturers who made them, who produced them. How was that process? How involved was he in this kind of research and product development? Sorry, you have. Please speak into the microphone.
So it's actually Aalto started the furniture design already, of course, in the 1920s. And during the Turku years, they collaborated with furniture maker Otto Korhonen. Otto, yes. And I think that was the start of not only collaboration and in a way the invention and development of the technical solution for the bent wooden legs, but it was also I think for Aalto a kind of a school maybe where he started to again kind of develop and vary certain solutions and then use those in a different ways. And then of course an important role was with Artec company,
yes.
founded in 1935. again a collaboration with the Gulliks, Maire Gulliks, Aino Aalto, Alvar Aalto, and Niels Gustav Hall, and it was to not only to promote Aalto furniture and to sell Aalto furniture, but also to integrate or to promote modern art. It was a kind of combined goals, and that company then made it possible to, in a way, enlarge the business. And in that also Aino Aalto had an extremely important role. And it's, of course, they took part into the glassware design competitions. So the scope was very, very wide. And then very early lamps came into the design table. And the earliest always connecting with some building project, like the Paimio Sanatorium or Turku newspaper building would be the first ones, and the kind of the key. I would say the Paimio is one of the key buildings in this sense.
Mm. And the designing language was very similar. That there is the stories that very often in the evening, after when workers has went away from the office, Aalto went to the drawing table and making some sketches. And next morning, when the worker was coming, he was looking at the sketch and start to think about: is this a lamp? Is this a chair leg? Or is this a city plan? So he has to know that what is the scale of this, because the language was very similar, that the chair leg could be also the pillar or not exactly the lamp, but sometimes.
Eva, you want to chime in? Or?
I mean, the Artek story is just amazing, and I think it was partly due to the fact that, once the furniture first got exhibited, there was such an international interest it was exhibited in Milan, that this idea of starting this company to manage the production and distribution of the work kind of came into being. So it was kind of in that order. And it was indeed a group of individuals that started the company. And beyond that, even this sort of whole network of international distributors that were assembled so it is really kind of almost like an Artek, a network rather than, just, it was a truly ambitious enterprise. So, I mean, Aalto was a collaborator. I think also what is interesting about looking at how savvy the whole advertising kind of a media apparatus around about the domestic items and furniture was. He collaborated with many photographers and so forth. So it is it is a kind of a network of fabricators, distributors, and media that produced what we now think of hugely successful Aalto design items, and they still go strong, which is also quite astonishing.
Well,
I think I always say that if you get married in Finland, you probably get 5 Aalto vases as a present.
I would maybe like to add one more thing, and it's about the so-called total work of art concept, which also comes realized with this, in a way, the whole kit of objects that you could have. You could have Aalto house, you could have Aalto chairs, you could have Aalto lamps, if you wish. You could have Aalto fabrics also, to some extent.
Well, the question then is which Aalto? Is it Alva Aalto or is it Aino Aalto?
Well, it's yeah. It could be Aino. It could be even Elissa in some cases. Yeah. But also that these, if I think the early years of the furniture design, it like Eva-Lisa showed the early images of the exhibition. So the furniture served also the idea of the modern way of living, small apartments, lightweight furniture, affordable furniture. That was important.
All right, it is 90 minutes after. It's been 90 minutes since the lecture started. I don't want to take any more of your time than we already have, but maybe we can just squeeze one final question in, and this comes actually back to architecture. This has the idea, and maybe Jari, you can take a stab at it, because it has to do with the idea of light in Aalto's houses, particularly at such a northern location with long winters, and how do you deal in your photography work, particularly? How do you deal with the timing and the seasonality, let's say, of how you manage the issue of light in Aalto's houses?
Yes, of course. The light role is very important in Aalto's houses, and of course in the summer we have was it the 60 days that in the north part of Finland sun doesn't go down, that we can took the pictures almost in the midnight. So that's lucky period for us, but also the winter. Then are the 60 days that the sun doesn't rise up at all in the north part of Finland. But for me, I'm quite interesting not the darkest season, not the brightest season, but those seasons which are on the between those. The spring and then the autumn are somehow my favorite ones. I don't know, did I answer the question, but that was.
Okay, so this seems like a very appropriate moment to end. I thank all three of you again for your marvelous presentations, and congratulations especially to Sirkka-Liisa and to Jari for a beautiful issue for A+U. So thank you all very, very much. And good evening.
Thank you, and thank you, Eva-Lisa, for your contribution.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you for the audience.
See you in Helsinki, hopefully next summer.
See you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seng.
Yes. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.